Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the folks across the globe. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I am Saukartika from TSI and I would be the moderator for this session. Today we are presenting Trace Output Viewer presented by Ed Jordan. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the session, please click on the hand raise button so that you will be unmuted to proceed with your questions. Or you can enter your questions straight away in the question chat box. Now, without further ado, we'll turn the time over to Ed. Our presenter today is Director of Software Development, who have been associated with TSI for more than 20 years. His fortes are TPF, C, and Assembler.
Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Ed, and today we're discussing the Trace Output Viewer, and we're going to cover most of the things that it does and see how to use it. So let's see. The Trace Output Viewer is an analysis tool that integrates with zTPFGI. You most of the time when you run it, you'll launch it from zTPFGI, and then it updates live from the information that's arriving to zTPFGI about trace output. For instance, the macros you've used, the instruction information, the address stop information, and so forth. So as it says, it shows the trace output, accumulates data during the zTPFGI session. There is normally just one trace output file that logs the data, and this is cleared when zTPFGI starts, and it fills up as zTPFGI runs, and you can manually clear it also if you want to sort of start over during gathering data during your GI session. You can save that the data that you've accumulated to a separate file so that you can save it for later. So as I sort of mentioned before, it shows information about macros, instructions, trace stores, address stops, and then a special view we call the ProgramFlow, which shows the flow of your application through macros. And as I said, it updates live, and you can, if you can launch it separately from GI if you wanted to, but when you launch it, you can open a file that you've saved previously if you want to. So it's a very good tool for analyzing the path of the transaction, and you know, there's some symbols we'll talk about as far as the program flow goes. You can view macros, instructions, and trace stores. You can filter. So as you're collecting data, you may produce data from more than one terminal, more than one ECB, more than one program, and so forth. And if you've collected all that data into the log, you can filter it so that you're seeing, for example, information from only one ECB or only for one program. You can also search, which is another kind of filter. So you can search for text within the data you've collected. And then you can get the data out of the Trace Output Viewer by copy and pasting, by printing, you know, or by exporting. And as we said, you can save and save as. These are some of the symbols that are in the program flow, and the macros they represent. And macros that don't really fit into that flow are represented by the sort of just the yellow rectangle there. Macros that don't change the flow, but just exist within it. Okay, so we're going to go over to GI. And so this is the end. Okay, we've just disconnected from, so we'll connect again to the system. Now you can view the Trace Output Viewer without being connected to a system, and in that case you can open a pre-existing file, and that's fine, and we'll show that later. But for now we'll connect to a system so that we can generate some new data. Okay. So this tab is called the Analyze tab of the ribbon. Let me get that complete. And that's where the Trace Output Viewer button is to, we're always collecting the data. You don't have to have the viewer open to collect the data. The data is always being collected and logged into that file. But if you want to view the data, you can click this button to view it. So let's open that viewer. Just talk about it a little bit. Let's see. So there's some shortcuts up here. Here is where you can open a new trace output viewer. We'll show that in a moment. You can save a copy of the data. You can export the data. Refresh. If normally the data refreshes automatically, so you don't have to do this refresh. But if you wanted to pull in the data that's in the file, maybe you made a change to the data, and you want to refresh it with what's actually in the file because you haven't saved that change you made, you can refresh. This is clearing it, so this is important for if you've collected data and you want to start over, you could clear it. And then printing. We'll get to the edit and search later. We'll get to the view later when we actually have some data. Okay. This is the filter area where you can filter, and this is where the data appears. And then you can see that the data appears down, can be actually filtered by tab also, so that you can view all the types of the data. You can view the macros only, the instructions only, and so forth. Why don't I go ahead and pull in a saved file so I can show that a little better. So before I do that, let me show you. See, it says it's on online mode down here. I've opened it from GI, and online mode means it's connected to GI, and GI is communicating with it whenever new data appears, and the data is refreshed here. If I click open, this is going, and I open that, it actually opens another viewer, so you don't mess up your online mode. And you say this says offline mode, so this data, this window is devoted. So you can have more than one running at a time, more than one file open at a time, but this window is devoted to the log that the GI is filling up, the log file, and there's nothing in it right now. That's why it's empty. This one, I've opened one that I've previously saved by doing file, save a copy. Okay, so this lets us view things a little bit better here. So the you can see we've collected in this previous run of GI that we've saved the data. We've collected data from 2 different terminals involving 2 different ECBs, involving these programs, and so it can be filtered on these things, which I'll show in a moment. You can also see that the different macros, instructions, trace stores, and let's see, I think I know there are address stops in here. Also, we'll see those. They're denoted by different codes in different colors, and then the data appears in these columns. The context is telling you basically this information up here: what terminal, what ECB, and what program. Then there's information about the macro instruction, the same kind of thing that would appear in the ECB when you're running, the operation and the operand and so forth. Now, if I go to the macros tab, I'm only seeing the macros. If I go to the instructions tab, I'm only seeing the instructions, and as you'd expect for the stores and the address stops. So the address stops are blue. There's different modes of viewing. So right now I've got these check marks. That's because I have show all items and mark matching items. That's in case you were filtering. If I turn that off, the checkmark row goes, and you can control a couple of the other columns also, whether you want to see them or not. Maybe you don't want to see the context column. So you can hide that if you'd like. And perhaps these item numbers you don't feel those are worth the, those can be useful, but if you want to hide those, you can hide those. The reason those might be useful is you can go to an item number in case you noted you're doing a lot of analysis and you've noted that, so say item 452 is very significant to you, and you remembered that number and then you'd gone somewhere else. You could cause it to go to 452. Okay, so that's there. Maybe it's not likely that you would use it, but that feature is there, and that's why you might want to know what the item numbers are. But if you don't want to know what those are, you can hide those, and so give yourself some more room for just the data that you care about. Now, as far as I might as well show you the filtering while we're here. So on the filtering, obviously. Now let me show the context information so it's a little clearer that it's doing the right thing. So right now this is showing ALC1 and ALC2 also. If I hide ALC1, then I'm only seeing the ALC2 information, as you'd expect. I can see that ALC2 has these two ECBs, so well, it's the same. I mean, each ALC collected information for one ECB, so filtering on the ECBs in this case would be the same as filtering on the ECBs. And then filtering on the programs, if you knew you didn't care about CIAA, that wasn't really what you were focusing on here. You could hide the programs that you didn't want to see. The final way of filtering, and this is where the show only matching or show all items and mark matching items might come in. Well, actually, let me show you that. Show all items and mark matching items. Now we've got the check marks row. So when I filter, let's say I don't want to see that or that or that. Let's see. Okay. You might have filtered and then the items that still match the filter, all the items are shown. So you can see in context where the items that you really care about are. And this next and previous buttons let you go from between the items. So this will skip over all the ones that aren't checked, go down to the one that's not checked. So that can be useful. And that's all. That's the same as these buttons here. Go to next matching item, go to previous matching item. The final way of filtering is to do a search, and this will search for text within these columns. So let's say you want to search for CBA. Let's try CBAU there. Let's try that. Down here we can see there are a total of 1,372 entries here. 311 actually are matching this text CBAU. So if we go to there we go. We found one of the items there, and so this can be useful for this mode can be useful for seeing it in context. If you don't want to see it in context, you can just say show only matching items. You won't get the checkmark column anymore, and this would just go. These buttons aren't as useful than the previous and the next if you're not doing the checkmark form of matching. Checkmark view of matching, excuse me. We can clear that and go back to everything. Okay, so let's go up and see some live data captured. So I'll just close. I'll leave that open for a moment in case it's still useful to us. So go up here to GI, and you see the trace output viewer has gone away, but if I if I just click it, that brings it forward. So this button will show it the first time and launch it, and it will also bring it forward if you lose it and don't want to use Alt Tab or something to go see it. And it's also here in the taskbar. So we'll go to the System tab. We'll show ALC1. Let's just for this, you can set up any kind of trace you want, including trace store, anything like that. If you wanted to do trace store, of course, well, you could click there and get the full trace options window for tracing everything that you want to trace. Because I've clicked the All Macros button, you see all the macros are selected. And the Trace Store button, you would need to select what kind of trace store you want and what the core address is, and depending on the secondary parameters once you select what kind of store you want to trace. And that information would also be written to the trace output viewer. Address stops, similarly, you can add address stop, say what program you want to add it for, and so forth, what displacement, and then put it over there, and those would be saved. I'm not going to do that right now. Delete all trace stops. I'll just cancel out of this. We've got all macros selected. Now, also important when you want to gather trace information quickly, because the information will be gathered if you when you're normally stepping through, normally running to the next trace stop, and you enter your interactive testing. That data will be collected, but sometimes you just want to collect data quickly, just run it so you can analyze it later. Then you can click the Run On button. What that button does is it means we won't stop. We'll just run the transaction or whatever else you're doing without stopping interactively, so that you can just view it later, analyze it with the trace output viewer. So we'll just enter something simple here to generate some trace that will run. And you see it didn't stop even though we have all macros on because of the Run On button. And now that data has been collected. And if we switch to the trace output viewer, but going back to the Analyze tab, you see this is filled up with that data, and it's only macro data because we didn't set up any stores, add stops, and we didn't do any instruction steps during the during interactive trace. So it's just all macros. Now let's talk about the ProgramFlow tab. ProgramFlow is the last tab down here. It's a little different than the other tabs because these are basically just filters on types of the trace. This is taking the trace that you have and putting it into the flow of what has happened, the returns and the enters and so forth. We go back over here. Just to remind you of what these mean. So this can be useful, obviously, in seeing what's happening. This sort of column here. Let's have the get rid of the check marks. Okay. This is showing the indentation level just numerically, and that's how far they're indented over. Then you have this information about the flow. Now, you can, you might often want to say, okay, I want to make this part of I want to save this data for myself in a spreadsheet. I want to make it part of a report or something. So if you want to do that, you can select all. That's if you want to select all the data. And then you can go copy. And then you could paste it into Word. You could paste it into Notepad if you wanted. You could paste it into Excel. I should have Excel running in my browser. Let's see. There we go. So I've got that data, and let me paste it. So I'll do let's paste. Okay, I'll use the shortcut key. So I've hit the shortcut key. Excel is working on taking that data from the clipboard. Now, this is available not only from ProgramFlow. You can copy and paste this data from any of the tabs, not just ProgramFlow. There are two ways to copy the data from ProgramFlow. I'm showing you the first one now. So here's the item numbers. Here's the, the numeric representation of the indentation, and the other information broken out in columns from the ProgramFlow. So remember the ProgramFlow, oh, that's the wrong window. Let me go back to the live window. I'll just close this one so I won't get confused. You can see this one is an offline mode, so I know which one I'm closing. Go back to the one I'm actually using. You see, this data is not it's indented, so it's not really in proper columns. You might want to get the data out of the ProgramFlow so you can sort it by column. And then this would tell you the indentation level. So this might be the way you really want to preserve the data. And of course, once you get it over here in Excel, you can delete and so forth. Another way that, let me just open another tab in Excel. Another way you can copy the data is copy ProgramFlow with indentation. And that will produce a picture much more. You still won't get the icons, but it will get a picture that's indented like this one. Not a picture, but it will get the data with the indentation. So I've copied that. Come over here, and now I'll use Control-V to paste it. And you see the indentations are there, and you can see that better if you maybe go to a different font, like Courier New or Courier. Now you can see the indentations much better when you're looking at that, and you get a picture more like what you're doing. And so you could use this for a report just to save your data, to reference from your analysis or something like that. If you just wanted part of this data, you could just multi-select. So I'm going to multi-select by starting up here. Maybe I'll start here, and then I'll hold down the Shift key. And now I've got that data. It might be a little hard to see the light gray color that shows it's selected. Let's see. You can also select by, I'm holding down the Shift key and pressing the down arrow now. And so I'm selecting a lot of the data. And you can just select that data and then do copy in the way that you want and put it over here. Other ways to get the data out of the trace output viewer include exporting. So if you do that, then here's exporting as text, exporting as XML, exporting as an HTML table, which could be useful for, well, if you want to use the data that way. Comma-separated values, if you want that, or as a spreadsheet, just as an XLS file. You can export it that way. So you would select that and save it. And then let's see where that data is. I saved it to documents. I can't remember where I saved it. Well, anyway, it's there in XML format, so you can look at that and see if you how to use and interpret that XML format. We don't have export to JSON right now. If you're interested in that, we could look into providing that. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say. Printing, you can also print. Okay, font size, yes. If you think this font size is too small, you want to change it, you can do view font size. Let's go 12 point. Now it's much larger. And then you'd need to adjust your columns so you can see the data. Okay, I hope that has shown you a few things you didn't know, and we can now take any questions you have about this feature.
A gentle reminder to all the attendees, if you have any questions, please click on the hand raise button, or you can enter this question straight away in the question chat box. Ed, there's a question from Benta. Benta, I have unmuted you. You can proceed with your question now.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Ed. Now, my question regarding, because I'm really interested in the program flow, right? So based on what you have shown, I need to copy the program flow into an Excel document to have it display in the format that I would like. But my question really is, is there a way to compare to program flow by using the already, I don't know whether that function already work with this in the source when you have compare file, whether it would allow me to compare to program flow to identify the anomaly.
Very interesting. There is no current built-in way to do that, and it sounds like a great idea, but I'm not sure it's been requested in the past. Probably our support people could tell us that. If you're looking like for a side-by-side comparison?
That works too. I mean, it's a similar, I mean, whichever way, I think obviously the most efficient way just to simply identify the anomaly, the discrepancy, right? But I can live with whatever we have today in the compare file.
Yes, right. There's no built-in way to get into it quickly. Now, if you want to do it, obviously it can be done by, not quickly, by exporting. So let me export, I believe this will export the entire file. I don't believe I have to, no, it wouldn't make any sense to require a selection in order to export. So if we did text, and we save, and I'll try to remember where I'm saving it this time. Let's see. So basically, I would probably save it to text, and then I don't think I showed that you can actually delete certain items if you want to. Now this might never come in handy, but you can. Let me maybe delete this just to produce a difference, and then I'll save a copy. Might have to save a copy and open it. I'm not sure because there's no save on here because I'm in the online mode, and that's a little bit of a problem here in order to do this quickly. But so probably what you would do is you would save it. You would want to save a copy, then save as text. Well, now let's see. If you just save as text twice, once after the change, once before the change, then you could open that and compare in GI. That's basically where I'm going, or in any other favorite comparison program that you like. That's the shortest way I know to do it. Obviously, if we wanted to support that more quickly, we could, but we don't have any way to do that right now. Do the steps I outlined make any sense? Make sense?
Yes, definitely. I can definitely go try that. Okay.
Let us know if how that works for you, and if you've got a wish list item for supporting it better or more quickly, let us know.
Okay,
Thanks.
I will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ed, there's one more question from Muri, and it says, how does Trace Output Viewer deal with multiple ECBs?
Okay. This is something, well, it will save the ECBs. Well, it will save everything into the same log file in the order that it came in. Then, obviously, when you're looking at the filter, let me open that other file again. You'll see the multiple ECBs listed up here, so you can filter on them if you want to. The program flow will you'll see the things as they come into the PC client. What order those that information comes in might depend on whether you're stepping into newly created ECBs. If you were debugging interactively, it would depend on what order you're stepping into those new ECBs. There are some options in GI about what you do when a new ECB is created and so forth. I believe you would need to go into the preferences to determine how ECBs are handled. There we go again. So that you could control what order the items of information arrive. Do we have a TSI host person on the chat right now on the webinar?
Yes, sir. Ashok is there.
Ashok, do you want to say anything about the options for the debugger options for when ECBs are stepped into and so forth? Those are on the System tab. So you go to the System tab, you can click this little thing right here. So you can also get through it to the zTPFGI options. So if you didn't know to click on this little tiny button here, you don't have to know. You can go to zTPFGI options and then find the debugger options, and then it's here. Ashok, would these options control when information is sent to the PC client for trace output?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Based on that option, the trace data will be sent to the trace output viewer.
Okay. And if I was running trace with run on, these things would these things affect when the information from different ECBs arrived?
Yeah, that will be whatever the data the trace, that will be getting logged in the trace output viewer.
Okay.
Yeah, you can run the entry ZUVA0.
Okay.
That will log multiple ECB.
And then we could get the information for that? Okay. So
Yeah,
ZUVA0. Okay.
Yeah.
And should I check any of these buttons for that?
Yeah, create a child ECB immediately. No.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So let me say OK on this. Then, because I'm going to be getting new information, I'm going to go to the trace output viewer, and I'm going to clear it so that I can, because I'm basically starting over, right? So I'm going to clear it. Okay. So now, ZUVA0, you said?
Yeah, right.
And let me make sure I have run on. I run on, I have all macros. Okay. So here we go. Okay. So now we'll go back to the trace output viewer.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
So, okay. Okay. So, so the multiple ECBs are, we collected quite a few. Does that, Let me clear it and do it again. Let me close this. I'm not reopen it. Okay. Let me just run that one more time. UVA 0. I didn't run it. Sorry. Oh. There we go. Okay, so let's go to trace output viewer. Okay, well, okay. So whether you have create child ECBs immediately determines when the ECBs come in. I mean, what information is in there, and then you can filter based on here if you only want to see certain ECBs. Does that answer the question?
Yes, Ed, it looks like we have answered all the questions. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. A short survey will open up. You can specify topics for the upcoming webinar session. We will send you follow-up email within a week's time, which will contain the link of this recorded session. If in case of any queries, contact Customer Support Executive or write to productsinfo@tpfsoftware.com. Thanks again for joining us today, and we have webinars followed on second Wednesday of every month. We'll see you next time. Thank you.